This is Kathy Shammer, and I'm doing my rough draft proposal, talking about it today. The title of my rough draft proposal is Factors Impacting Effective Job Accommodations for People with Psychiatric Disabilities. The abstract here is basically my research is to determine what factors do affect having effective job accommodations for people with psychiatric disabilities. Some of these disabilities are going to be schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders, which can include panic disorder or generalized anxiety disorder, and depressive disorders such as major depression. As many as 200 people are going to be screened. We're going to be recruiting from state VR offices and Veterans Administration and clubhouses. And these workers will be given 3 different questionnaires. First of all, they're going to be divided into 2 control groups. They're going to be screened to make sure they're working, but they're going to be divided into those who are receiving accommodations and working and those who are not. They're also going to bring their most recent evaluation, so we can track performance with that too. Of those 2 groups, those that are receiving accommodations will be openly interviewed to find out what accommodations they are receiving. All of them are going to take 3 questionnaires, which is the Minnesota Satisfaction Questionnaire, Quality of Work Life Questionnaire, and the Rosenberg Self-Esteem as a Worker Questionnaire. In the introduction, we're talking about psychiatric disabilities being among the most economically disabling conditions, and a lot of this has to do with stigma. We define these disabilities as kind of a wide range of behavior and or psychological problems characterized by anxiety, mood swings, depression, or kind of an altered sense of reality. And these behaviors persist over time. They are not in response to a particular event. So working for people with psychiatric disabilities, like anybody else, is very important, because working promotes self-esteem, it promotes a sense of accomplishment, it also involves social interaction, and it's also helpful for people with psychiatric disabilities. It improves clinical functioning. A lot of people with psychiatric disabilities allege that employers discharge them, and the second following that is they fail to provide reasonable accommodations. There have been a number of studies showing positive impact between job tenure and accommodations for people with psychiatric disabilities, and this is more under the supported employment. Supported employment is both helping people get the job and providing ongoing support once they get the job. Now, we know that accommodations are defined as changes in the workplace that allow the person with a disability to do the job. And this can include changes in the workforce structure, modification to the job task, or also changes in schedule. Unfortunately, there's many costs and benefits for people who disclose their disability to an employer, because there is a lot of social stigma out there, and a lot of people are afraid with psychiatric disabilities are afraid to divulge this. They'd rather pass as invisible that they don't have a psychiatric disability. And a lot of people with psychiatric disabilities are not aware of their rights with the ADA Act. Helping them understand their rights can help with creating an effective accommodation plan. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of professionals in the field in vocational rehabilitation that have negative attitudes towards people with psychiatric disabilities that can impede competitive employment, such as just placing them in low-level jobs and not matching their skills to the job, and also believing that recovery can never happen for them. Some of the research questions I'm going to be asking in this paper, obviously, are what factors contribute to having effective job accommodations for people with psychiatric disabilities? What factors are most significantly related to the effectiveness of job accommodations for people with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders, and major depression? What is the relationship between job tenure and accommodations for people with psychiatric disabilities? And finally, what is the causal relationship between psychiatric disability and cognition skills, not being able to communicate the need for accommodation? And this is not for fear of disclosure. This is that they are not able, because of their disability, to know what they need for an accommodation due to the cognition impairment with their disability. The significance of this research is that many times accommodations for psychiatric disabilities can be pretty confusing. The disability itself is not static like a spinal cord disorder, but it has crests and valleys, and sometimes it has multiple diagnoses, a lot of times, like major depression and substance abuse. And employer attitudes definitely impact the extent where people with psychiatric disabilities are accepted in the workplace. A lot of evidence suggests that inadequate accommodations are associated with poor employment outcomes, including job performance, well-being, and lack of promotion. So even if the employer does provide the person with psychiatric disorder accommodation, or they're open or willing to, does the employee know how to effectively communicate what they need for an accommodation? I ask this because a lot of times people with psychiatric disabilities, their cognition is impaired and they may not know, which impacts communication skills, and they may not know how to ask for what they need. And this also impacts the relationship with a vocational rehabilitation counselor. If they don't have a good counselor that knows how to assess what they need, they can just go pretty much under the radar. So basically, the study can potentially help vocational rehabilitation counselors understand the complex need around providing accommodations for this type of group. This can help them create more of an individualized plan rather than a cookie cutter approach, which I know a lot of counselors like to do or tend to do. Having a breakdown of these psychiatric disorders with accommodations, like what works best for schizophrenia, what works best for major depression, can also give them ideas on how to create a more effective plan. And also maybe help their clients to compete more take part in more of a competitive market out there, and attain job tenure. So my project design and method, basically I'm using an experimental randomized control design by forming two groups, those who receive job accommodations and those who don't. The research conducted for the study will be up to, as I said, 200 participants, 100 males, 100 females, ranging from 20 to 45 years old. These participants will be recruited from state offices and clubhouses from Austin, Houston, and Dallas. We'll also be recruiting from the Veterans Administration too. Participants will be given a consent form to fill out and give their doctor, and the doctor will then confirm the diagnosis and send it back to us. And what is being interviewed here, again, I'll say, is anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, schizophrenia, major and bipolar disorder. Participants will be categorized as either currently receiving job accommodations at their current employer or not receiving job accommodations. Those who are receiving job accommodations will be openly interviewed on what types of accommodations they are currently receiving. And both groups are going to take three fixed questionnaires: the Minnesota Satisfaction Questionnaire to determine the employer's satisfaction with their job, and the Rosenberg Self-Esteem as a Worker questionnaire. So actually there's only two. Now the Rosenberg Self-Esteem as a Worker questionnaire basically measures the participants' self-worth by determining their positive and negative feelings about themselves. Both groups are going to be asked to bring their most recent evaluation to determine how their job accommodation is impacting their performance level. The data will be collected and categorized by what type of psychiatric disability, such as bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, Within these DORAS orders, there will be a category for the type of accommodation the employee received, along with the job performance and job tenure. This concludes my proposal. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to hearing of all of yours.